Great. Well, I'm going to share with you guys a few really interesting stats about, I think, is a really interesting market opportunity. Who currently, by the way, markets or advertises to the over 50s? Oh, look, we've got quite a few people in the room. Yeah. That's good, that's good. Yeah. So before I ask Jacqueline a little bit about what Getty Images are doing, I just thought I'd sort of share some stats with you that you might find interesting. So the over 50s hold a substantial 80% of the UK's wealth. Their consumer spending has grown an average of 4.4% annually over the past decade, compared to 1.2% for those under 50. Gen X, who are now in their 50s, have a higher average net worth than younger generations, particularly millennials and Gen Z. However, we're feeling, I say we, because I'm in this category, feeling very underrepresented. 78% of those 50 plus do feel underrepresented. And here, lastly, is a really great stat. 49% of the over 50s actively avoid brands that ignore them. So interesting stats, aren't there, really, here, Jackie? So tell us a little bit about what Getty Images specifically are doing to address this.
Absolutely. I just want to start by saying I'm very jealous of the fans in the front.
The fans in the room, yeah. We are melting here because we've got literally lights coming at us.
Wafted a little bit. No, I just want to start by saying, Gordon, I'm delighted to be here. I was here at MadFest, great festival. And I'm also very excited to be here to talk about what we're passionate about at Getty Images for the better part of the last decade, which is really, really looking at how can we do better authentic representation of people aged 50 plus. If you stop to think about it, that is such a very varied age group. We're all living longer, so 50 plus to 100 plus. And as we all know, no matter how much we identify with either generation, we're not one homogenous group. So it's a very, very complex picture. However, when you look at what brands are downloading through Getty Images Visual GPS, which is our creative intelligence platform, so we've kind of got a good sense of what brands are downloading to communicate to the 50 plus. It's very limited, and I'd almost argue it's very harmful. So we see a lot of cliches. One thing I will say to you straight out is that the older you get, the more you disappear from our customer downloads. The higher up you get, 60s, 70s, 80s, you're almost gone in terms of what brands are downloading. Stories tend to be, as you get older, around in some way a medical condition, or you have a dependency on family members. And then there's just a lot of like really harmful cliches around technology. So this is a really simple that you'll see on the screen just rolling behind me, some of the stats we have at Getty Images. But a baby boomer, for instance, is 9 times less likely to be seen with any piece of technology, including a smartphone, than Generation Z, in terms of what brands are downloading to tell some of those stories.
I mean, they can really make a difference when you, one of the things I always say is that, you know, the over 50s more generally, we're more loyal, aren't we? We listen to people. We're a lot less likely to switch from brands. So when brands do invest in talking to us, it makes a big difference.
True, and we also see that in terms of, we ask lots of questions at Getty Images on, for people who are age 50 plus, very specifically in images, what's going to actually drive their trust within the brand and their loyalty within the brand. So for us, we've very much seen that it's people-centered storytelling. It's actually showing me as that person within this age group. And we found that less than 10%, so it comes in, sometimes depending on what we ask this survey, between 6 and 9%, depending on the country we're looking at. It's definitely single digit for the UK, of 50 plus age people who feel they're actually represented in advertising. So there's a huge visibility gap that this age group actually perceives. And so they really feel, and for me this is the most poignant stat, Gordon, and I'm working at Getty Images for 14 years now looking at data, but we really see when we ask why is it so important for you to be seen, they really talk about how there's a huge amount of age discrimination. So we all know that as a given, but to see it in the data, it's quite staggering. And so they'll talk about less opportunities for employment,
Definitely.
less opportunities, you know, just to for their mental health, like just a lot of less opportunities. So they want to see that exploded. Now, you know, we do a lot of image testing. So we'll test things like humorous, conceptual type of visual storytelling. We'll test, you know, just showing people as they are in their everyday life. Nearly 100% of people aged 50 plus really gravitate on that question of trust in a brand with seeing people who look like me in my everyday life, seeing the product in a real life setting. Another interesting story would be around sustainability, because obviously there's many, many different types of topics that this age group feels very passionate about. When it comes to sustainability, and we just have a report that's just launched this week, it's really down to seeing themselves in the visual story, taking individual action for the planet. So whether it's composting on a daily basis, eco-proofing their home, getting involved in a community project, they want to see themselves. We don't see that for the other generations around sustainability. So you can see the consistency around, no matter what the story is, it really is to just close the visibility gap that
Now,
exists.
I can see from some of your images here, you've got a real diverse group of you know, colourful individuals. That's so important, isn't it? To make sure that we're tapping into these very unique communities as well.
So what you can see here on the screen, Gordon, is the Disrupt Aging collection, which is, God, it's about 8 years old now, Getty Images, 8+ years old. And this is where we've partnered with an age organisation, AARP. But it is what you just said there. It's really aimed at authentically creating multi-dimensional experiences and visual storytelling that really flex a very, very, very varied age group, as I said at the start. So that's what this collection really sets out to do.
I mean, the other thing I think is fascinating is the amount of disposable income that some of this sector has. And I read a stat the other day that the average 62-year-old spends £12,000 a year on travel. I mean, it's incredible, isn't it? When you think about that, what else do they spend money on? You know, fitness, food, drink. You know, and I'm very much in this category here. So I'm feeling as though, what do I like to be? I don't want any more pure cremation ads. So if anybody is responsible for pure cremation, I'm very sorry, but I'm not ready yet. So but the point I'm saying is we still want to feel like we're young at heart. So talk to us, you know. We have a, you know, I say the royal we, I don't mean me, but, you know, a large percentage of my group has got a significant amount of disposable income. And they could be spending it on, but, you know, if I want to buy an Aston Martin, I don't want to see a 23-year-old driving it. I want to see somebody that looks like me. So this representation is so, so important, isn't it?
Well, there's a good, sorry, I'm watching the slides here as they're flying by. There's a really good point as well around entrepreneurs, senior entrepreneurs essentially, but there's a huge visibility gap there as well, Gordon. You know, if I think about just advertising in general and the history of this industry we're all part of, you know, going back 10+ years ago, there used to be a point where there was a flip by some brands like Taco Bell, where, I don't know, some people will be too young to remember this, but where they'd have an ad campaign where people were breaking out of the retirement home to be like teenagers, you know, to in their friendship groups. And at the time it was really about, I remember the messaging was all about Mick Jagger, you know, that it was like aging, and he was redefining along with a whole generation of what it meant to age. So there was massive shift in advertising from aging gracefully, you know, with some of the kind of beauty driven campaigns, to aging with attitude. And so it had a very fierce messaging that was going on. But again, this screen here is quite good, because again, though, it's about the fact that, you know, again, we have to expand the visual language, right? We have to get beyond the cliches. We can't just simply get beyond the cliches by flipping them on their head as well. We've got to build out all that very varied storytelling to be as relatable as possible.
What brands do you think, and I'd love to get, because I want to leave some time at the end for some questions from the audience, which brands do you think are really leveraging this 50+? I mean, one of the ones that I thought of a few years ago was B&Q. B&Q realized that they had quite a large young workforce in the stores. And the ironic thing is they really didn't know a lot about DIY. And so they flipped it and they thought, well, what about employing some people that are significantly older, that have probably learnt a few things along the way. So now if you go into a B&Q and you see a 50+ guy, he's the guy you go and ask and say, have you got a bit for this? You know? But this is the sort of stuff we're talking about, isn't it? And keen to get
Yeah.
some other stories and case studies that you
Yeah, I
might know.
could talk about two in particular, British brands. So we'll talk about NatWest. So we have a lot of customer conversations, where people do come to us and they're really either trying to leverage their visual storytelling with a budget, to be quite frank, time constraints. They want to have legacy in the library that they're building for their brand, and they might have to speak to a diversity of generations, or they're going to be very site-specific on a target. And so NatWest came to us a couple of years ago, and I think they did a really good job because they wanted to leave a legacy and not just build a brand campaign. So they came to us to really talk about female entrepreneurship in particular. So we're really getting into a far more intersectional lens, especially around that age group. And so they wanted to bring all of their female entrepreneurs up and down the UK. And we talked about this before the COVID pandemic hit. And when we went into the COVID pandemic, their research department was finding that female entrepreneurs were getting even far more hit than their male counterparts. So they came to us and they wanted to tell really good storytelling, but they wanted to partner with us at Getty Images to really confirm, well, what are the stereo cliches, right, around senior entrepreneurship. And at the time, we were selling none of that content. We were creating it, but no brands were downloading it. And so, I could confirm with the data that we have, just female entrepreneurs in general tend to be mid-20s, early 30s if you're lucky. Not that there's anything wrong with these businesses, but they tend to run businesses like clothing boutiques or, flower shops or bakeries. And so with NatWest, we really wanted to understand how did you focus on senior entrepreneurs as part of their overall story and look at real businesses up and down the UK and then tell that storytelling throughout the COVID pandemic. And they went one step further. So they set up the Female Focus Collection, which is on Getty Images, and they put all of that storytelling out there for other brands to use. So I think that was a really good legacy. And I really am very proud of them for doing that because you can see all of the rich businesses like Reclaim Timber, a lot of sustainability businesses some of the senior entrepreneurs were running. The second case study is more a charity organisation, which we work quite a bit at Getty Images with charity organisations. And so we had women in sport here in the UK. And again, during the COVID pandemic, they were really seeing that women in midlife, particularly between the ages of 45 to 55 plus, were really getting impacted because they were the sandwich generation, they weren't really getting the time to access for physical health and so on. And so again, they came to us with an idea, and again, they did something very similar to NatWest, but they wanted to look at building a collection called #MenoPossibilities, which goes on quite a bit into the 50 plus age group, and again was looking at real women up and down the UK who were either running football clubs for women up to the ages of 80 plus, or they were running a gym out of their garage and they were really trying to be a leading voice in their community. Lots of different stories like that. So I think where brands really try to understand that the visual language is not expanded upon, is not available for lots of brands to be able to pick up and quickly use. That's where I think there's a really good legacy that's been left.
Do you think obviously I come from an influencer background here, but I think there's a massive opportunity for brands to work with 50 plus influencers that effectively they can identify with. So for people in the room here, what are some of the things that you think they could do with their own brands or their clients' brands that could help target this sector or create a campaign around it?
I think the most important thing, honestly, is to start with your own unconscious bias, because that's a really difficult thing to do, and to really take the time to take a step back and understand, either with your team or yourself, what do you normally go for? What do you normally select? What do you brief out? What do you try? And honestly, I'm speaking here just purely from a visual language perspective. What do you actually have done in the past? Have you done an audit? Where are you going with things? And start to bring in more multi-perspectives. Start to reach out to bring in more people into the room to have that conversation. Second is really about your audience. So is it the UK? Is it multi-markets? We at Getty Images have diversity, equity and inclusion toolkits across many different markets that really look at the question of age. And so we can see in the UK, when we compare to other markets, age is actually the number one bias that people say as a population they most encounter. Whereas we see actually for other markets, it's gender or it's body or it's race and ethnicity, But again, it's really looking at how do you map that out to be most relevant. And so what are the key questions to ask? So we provide a lot of support on what those questions can be to get that conversation going internally.
And how important it is, do you think, for agencies and brands to have a workforce that represents that? So, I mean, this is quite honestly quite a young industry, isn't it? So, you know, do you think we should have opportunities for, you know, older people to get into the back into the industry?
Yeah, yeah.
You know, perhaps even
I think it's get back or a career change.
Career change or something. You know,
yeah.
I know friends of mine, in fact a friend recently who's ex-Apple, and he applied for over 200 jobs, and he was confronted by age, although he didn't say it, but there was definitely an implication of that's what it was, is you're too old to work here. So, you know, that is a concern, isn't it?
I think there's a lack of storytelling happening again. I remember 10 plus years ago, Prudential, the finance brand, they did a big campaign around Second Lives.
Second Lives,
I don't know if
yeah.
some people remember that in the room, but it was really about reimagining storytelling around retirement and the opportunities, and the stories were very, you know,
Heartfelt.
to the core, very to the
Heartfelt.
core.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes there's not enough of that conversation actually happening out there, Gordon.
100%.
Yeah.
Great. I wanted to have 5 minutes, if we could, because it's a short session.
We've actually had 2 questions come through.
Oh, we have.
Some very
Great.
diligent delegates here.
Wonderful,
The
wonderful,
questions on the
wonderful.
app. So both of them sort of go a little bit beyond the sort of visual language question, more like, I guess, the spirit of these campaigns and the destination of some of these assets. So firstly is an interesting one. So it's how do you represent this demographic without causing yourself the reverse problem of sort of isolating younger generations, and is there a way to blend? I mean, for me, I feel like the algorithms do quite a lot of that for you.
Yeah.
In terms of limiting cross-contamination of assets, but I don't know if you have another point of view.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that fascinates me, having been to Cannes Lions just a few weeks ago, one of the things that really resonated with me is the power of community. You know, now it's not always about transactional stuff, it's about bringing people together, and there's no reason why that can't be as important. I think it's, to your point, it's all about storytelling, is making people feel inclusive. You know, it doesn't have to be Gen Z's over here and 50 plus is over here. It can be, what do we all have in common? Well, we all have fashion in common, or we all have food in common, and that should be the driver. But what do you think?
Yeah, we've debated this a lot in the creative department at Getty for many, many years. How do we go post-demographic? Like, how do we get beyond that, you know?
Yeah.
Instead of like slicing and dicing all the time. Now, obviously, we look at it from a visual language point of view. So we do quite a bit of visual testing because we're trying to advise brands. If you've got to cut through the noise, you're limited. What's the type of visual storytelling that can connect across generations?
Yeah.
But I think to your point, Gordon, it is genuinely down to what's the shared values?
What's the shared values?
What's the shared
Exactly right.
values?
Yeah,
Yeah.
100%. Good.
And then another one is, in that spirit as well, but it's what are some of the best avenues or platforms to reach this demographic? Where do you think they want to see themselves represented, particularly on social media or elsewhere?
Well, I think it also depends on the type of, I mean, I would say that most of my audience is on LinkedIn, because from a professional point of view, that's where I would see that. But I've had a go at TikTok, I've done Instagram, Facebook, only because there's less of me there, per se. Do you know what I mean? So you therefore stand out more. Do you know what I mean? But we can also be put off as well, because you suddenly think when somebody says, oh, I've only got, 25,000 views or 1 million views, and you think, oh, blimey, mine's just reached 700. So it's all a matter of context, isn't it, really? Facebook, of course, is still important, I think, for this demographic, because it's all about, where do a lot of the families, I mean, if I think about my mum, who's 89, she's active on social media all the time, but she does so because she wants to find out about what's going on in the family. So I think that's still quite an important part of the process. But what do you think?
Well, same. I was smiling a little bit because I just think back to the time when, they go, well, we've got to jump off this platform because the older generation is joining.
Exactly,
yes.
We're chasing them.
But I think we're kind of gone beyond that a little bit now, you know. And so it's interesting. Just yesterday, it's funny, as I was traveling here, there was a lady beside me and she just talked to me on the plane. She was like, oh, my mom, she was talking on the phone in a different language, and just turned around and said, I'm so sorry I was so loud, but I'm on with my mom because she's just posted all of her stuff out to Instagram to tons of people. And she's in the whole conversation.
But it's
But
authentic,
again,
but it can be
yeah.
authentic because it's not over-curated
That's
sometimes,
right,
those individual voices. Just to finish, I think,
Yeah.
you've got a great report
Yes,
that
yeah,
people
yeah.
can download.
Yes, yeah. We've got a little QR code behind there.
Oh, it is.
that will
Does
come
it-
up
is
in a
it-
few
is it
minutes.
popping up?
It's been rolling a few times.
Oh,
yeah.
beg your pardon. Right, okay,
Yeah.
that's fine. I've also done an age inclusion report in communities if anybody's interested in receiving that. So thank you for joining us for this little short session on over 50s. Hope you've enjoyed it and we've stimulated some thoughts for you. Follow us on LinkedIn. We'll follow you back. We'll share the picture. But anyway, thanks very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.